far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for taking time out to join us in this week's conversation surrounding generational wealth. I want to say happy Black History Month because we are in February. Therefore, we are reckoning and acknowledging all aspects of the Black community and what the Black community has and continues to do. Our lovely features of the day we have on the screen, of course, Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise Green, O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons, who are part of the 100 ABC inception and continue to do great work within our community. So please stay tuned, watch our fireside chats, and pay attention to all of the great things that many of our women who are in the inductees of the 100 ABC Women continue to do here in Canada and abroad. And with that said, for today's session, I would like to introduce my lovely ladies, and we will introduce them one at a time where they will give you their bio information about themselves. So we'll start off with Josine Sindani. Josephine, take it away.
Hi, guys. My name is Josephine Snani. I am the owner of JS Group, a construction company based out of Burlington, Ontario. I am a Sudanese born Canadian. I've worked with multiple organizations, including Sheraton Hotel, as well as the Hilton brand. I am a board member of the Black Enterprise Trade Network. And through my work in construction, entrepreneurship, and parenting, I have begun rebuilding my career to advocate for the youth in construction. So here I am.
Fantastic, very diverse, fantastic. Next up, we have Miss Lavinia Latham, who is joining us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lavinia Latham. I'm the co-founding partner at a law firm called Alphonse Latham LLP, where I practice human rights, employment law, and workplace investigations. I advise organizations across education and the public sector on complex workplace issues, and I've also had the privilege of representing clients before the Supreme Court of Canada, the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, and the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. I also conduct workplace investigations and speak nationally on leadership accountability as well as anti-Black racism. And I'm really honored to be recognized as one of the 100 accomplished Black Canadian women in 2024. And I currently serve as the vice president of the Black Law Females Association.
Very good, fantastic. Welcome, welcome. And next up, Tashina Noel. Welcome to the panel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanisha Noel, also known as Trailblazer Tanisha. So I'm a justice-focused scholar, a youth advocate, and social impact leader. I'm currently pursuing my master's of law at Osgoode Hall Law School, researching how gender, race, and socioeconomic status shape policing experiences of Black youth. I'm also the co-founder of the Duo Vita Collective and the Duo Vita Foundation, and we really focus on supporting mentorship, leadership, and access for equity-deserving youth and young adults. And I'm award recipient of 27 awards and scholarships, also including this year's 2026 Accomplished Black Canadian Women. And I also deliver keynotes workshops across Canada, equipping marginalized youth with career-ready skills and purpose-driven leadership to become the best person they could be. And I'm so honored to be here today and share more knowledge.
Fantastic, fantastic. And last but of course not least, Latoya Belfon. Welcome. Bonjour. Comment ça va?
Ça va toi? My name is Atoy Balfon. I'm a four-time best-selling author. I'm a publishing expert. I am an award-winning entrepreneur. I'm also a teacher with the English Montreal School Board. I'm a founder of and CEO of Labworks Publishing. We have supported over 300 diverse authors all over Canada and the US. I also am a part of several not-for-profits within our community, which helps Black high school scholars pair them with mentorship and give them opportunities to go into various fields, including medical and science fields. My thought leadership and community work have been featured on many platforms, but I'm honored this year to be a 100 ABC woman in Canada. I'm also received a Black History Month Laureate Award this year, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this panel.
Very good. Welcome, ladies. As you can see, everyone, we have a very diverse backgrounds, education, expertise with regards to the conversations happening here today. Before we go further, I will ask you, ladies. A lot of people like to ask the part, generational wealth. What is that? That means just having money. What is it? So I will ask for your definition and insights as to how you see generational wealth. So Lavinia, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I see generational wealth as more than just income generation for yourself, but leaving back something for the next generation. So there are various different legal foundations and elements that you can use to do so. I will say right off the bat, I am not a wills, trusts, or estates lawyer. And this information is not legal advice, it's legal information. But intergenerational wealth means that once your life has come to an end, although we never like to think that, there's something left back to give to the next generation coming forward.
Latoya, what's your perspective?
Well, I definitely agree with Lavina. For me, as an author and an educator, I think a lot about your intellectual property and ensuring that means your ideas, your businesses, and things of that sort are well protected and that you can leave something back for your children so that they don't have to start from scratch, not just your children, your community in general. So it's really important to be historians, pass on your knowledge through mentorship, pass on whatever access and opportunities you have to the people who are coming after you and ensuring that you do so to help give them that step to the next level.
And Tanisha?
Okay, that's such a great question. When I really think about generational wealth, I really think of knowledge before capital. It's the information that really gets passed on, like how money works, how credit works, how to invest, and how do we access things such as scholarships, awards, funding. Even sometimes when families don't have access to inherit, having that financial literacy, it can change the outcome. It gives like young people and people the language, confidence, and skills to make informed decisions and avoid costly mistakes, to ultimately build assets over time.
And Josephine?
The way I think of financial wealth and generational wealth is referring to financial stability overall, the access to opportunities, and then the ability to maintain and have safe, healthy understanding of money and how it works, and especially just sustaining the quality of life that you have. So financial stability, knowledge, security, quality of life, and a huge aspect of it also is the social and community wealth. So understanding that those four pillars work hand in hand together to create not only the knowledge that you need to pass down to your family or friends or community, but to sustain it for a very long period of time.
Very good, very good. So then we'll go into the questions here. So, Lavinia, when we think about the aspect of people are building wealth from the ground up, right? So then we got to try to consider, okay, what is required? How are we looking at the inheritance of property or other gains? What should people be doing?
Yeah, so when we're looking at building from the ground, but building wealth from the ground up, we're really looking at what does our current personal finances look like? Do we have a budget? Do we know where our money is ultimately going beyond where how it comes in? All of us, or most of us, we have a very clear understanding of what money's coming in, but is it staying in? And when it's staying in, where does your money have little jobs? Is there some that's set up for investments as opposed to just bills? So paying yourself first is very important as well. As it relates to actually using legal instruments, if you have a significant amount of money, even most when I look at various different families and structures that are common within the Black community, oftentimes there might be a house, right? Maybe it's a home that's been in the family for several decades when houses were much more affordable. And there is no plan for this house. It's really just very informal. And so, what's very important for families to understand is that they need to have some type of a will, a plan that's put into place that's going to really stipulate what's going on with this property once the property owner passes away. If that doesn't take place, then really unintended consequences can happen. There could be things that occur that end up causing the house to be lost from the family altogether, or it might fall into the wrong hands. I've seen situations where there might be maybe several people have their name on the property, and the property then ends up being divided in ways that were unintended by the individual who, within the family, it's known that the home exists for that person, but because of financial issues, things have been split up in unintended ways and lead to unintended consequences. And that's a real situation that I'm being very vague about that I've heard happen, but apparently it's a lot more common than we know. And it impacts a lot of families in the sense of people think they have something to give when in fact they don't. The other thing is using a home as if it were a bank account. So a lot of families will take off money off of the property, go and get a loan against the home, thinking that, hey, I've got access to this extra cash. And it doesn't necessarily work like that. I think a lot of families need to understand that when you take money out of a house, you are taking away from the equity, and that money has to go back in. It has to be returned to the bank. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about how property works and the wealth that can be accumulated with property. But I think a good first place to start, if there is a family home, is to understand exactly how much is the mortgage, who does this property belong to, and what is the plan for the family once the original property owner passes away.
Okay, we're going to come circle back to that after with regards to because many individuals do use the home, that equity, as their stepping stone or the nest egg to use later. But continue with that building from the ground up. Josephine, you kind of had like in the conversations, you had a similar as to your habits that we have developed in a sense of being able to grow the wealth and what we're looking at. What is it that you would like to say on those parts?
So we have to understand that, like Lavinia said, cash flow does matter. So more than just the income, where is the money going? How do we trace it? How do we show accountability for the money and being intentional on how we spend the money? So it doesn't matter if you're investing $10 versus $20. Investment should be a habit that we have to learn at a very young age, which is something that we don't learn as a community in a whole. Financial literacy and directing how you can use legal aspects to protect your wealth, as well as things like life insurance. A lot of the times, our community goes into debt for $8,000 to $12,000 when life insurance could completely cover that cost. And only 30% of Black families have life insurance, and it's such an easy thing to be able to set up. But again, those are conversations that we don't have as a community, and something that we should definitely bring up in general. And then when you look at wills and trusts, controlling your legacy, this is your legacy. How do you protect it? You worked your whole life to build up this wealth for your family. And like Lavinia said again, if you don't have a plan to allocate that funds and or that asset, you're left leaving your family in more hardship than you are protecting them and giving them a stepping stone for the next generation.
And Latoya, what's your perspective in the sense about building this wealth and the way we should be investing appropriately to at least start to establish?
Well, what I found, when I did a workshop for the BMO Black Entrepreneurship Program a couple of years ago, this came up a lot. A lot of individuals in our community are somewhat mistrustful of banks and accountants and any of those people in that profession. And so it's very difficult to receive information from a person that possibly doesn't look like you. So while there's so many benefits for life insurance and for loans and not using your own income to start a business, and there's a lot of mistrust in our community with banks and those things. So the big question is, how do we make business owners and individuals like ourselves more comfortable to go into those spaces and get the information that is necessary to make those decisions? That is where we are as businesses, as individuals. Why are so many of our people not taking that step? And so it's important for us to be visible in those spaces. It's important for someone in our community who is a life insurance broker to be visible in the spaces and say that I can help you, because faces or not, we are sometimes more comfortable with people who look like us. That's why visibility and representation is important, and is important in financial spaces as well.
And Tanisha?
Okay, I would say something is a lot of families usually are taught about earning money. We all talk about like getting the first time job, but we never really focus on protection until it's later on. I feel like something wealth without protection is fragile, which is why legal foundations are what turn income into something sustainable and transferable. And I think a lot of something that the Black community should prioritize is documentation. That includes like written agreements, that includes wills, that includes things, because a lot of times we do things by word of mouth, and that's not legally bounding. And I also feel like we rely on solely trust. We need to understand, especially early in their careers, that's often where income is lost. Like we need to understand the different rights and privileges that we have and be able to utilize that.
So a few things have been mentioned here just to start out in the sense of this conversation. I just want to tease a little bit. So we talk about the investment in how we've been taught or not taught, and how we utilize the tools that are available through us, whether it's through banking, through trust law, through aspects. But the teaching of us in the Black community to a certain extent is also lacking, right? So, and we have to deal about the historical discrimination that exists. So we know in the United States, when it comes to mortgages and lending, the redlining that has taken place over the years and the way that has changed does not mean that we are devoid of that here in Canada, right? We also know that racism still seeps in because we do not have a lot of people that look like us in the positions of power to be able to grant the loans and mortgages that we require, hence a lot of startups And business ventures go bust because there isn't the investment in that. But put that to the wayside, and let's say that we are receiving the mortgages and the lending, and we have now received. We have individuals that will be like, okay, my parents have a home. So, living, I'm circling back from where we started with the aspects of the mortgage, where individuals will say, okay, but our family has a home. Okay, that is our base, and our parents have been doing well because we have to think about the dynamics, right? You have the older generation that are more or less in government jobs or at least some form of a job where there are benefits and there is some form of pension to a certain extent, right? We're looking at the younger generation. Those jobs are kind of going to the wayside and main are on that latter half of what they're getting into. But let's say we're dealing with the mortgages and you do have a mortgage. Parents have then taken out some equity because parents are getting older, people are looking towards a retirement, or they had to pay for education for their younger children. And we all know the majority bulk, me including myself, we all had student loan debts that most parents are looking at. They don't want their children to have that OSAP debt factor. So equity has been taken out of the home. So some will say it's not a bad thing because my children are still going to have something that is called a home and a mortgage. They may have to then pay off the equity, but they are now receiving something where I did not receive from my parents. So, Tanisha, starting with you, how are we looking at that when we're talking about the potential of the generational wealth and something being left, whether the pros or cons? For children.
Are you able to just repeat it briefly? You were cutting out a little bit on my
Oh,
end.
my apologies. So what I was saying is right now we're dealing with the aspects where you have families where there is a home, right? So there's a mortgage that exists. Some are paid off, some are not. So either some parents have either taken equity out to aid with their own retirement that they're going through with, or they have vested into their children by paying for education. So part of the equity has been taken out. How do you see that when we're talking about for generational wealth, something being left behind for children? Because some may see it as, oh, I'm getting a home, but there's an equity I still have to pay, where others see it as a bonus because they're being left with something where in the previous generation there wasn't anything left to them.
Okay, that is such a good question. I believe when it comes to that, I think a lot of parents in the Black community, like if they're able to, they a lot of times they want to be able to pay for their children's education because as we know, school in Canada is important. To go to one of the best schools, it costs over 60 to $80,000 throughout the year. So I think when it comes to that is like for I would say like when it comes to like financing for education, we need to look at other ways. Like for example, scholarships. Scholarships are a great way to fund education without going into debt. And there's so many different kinds of scholarships, but a lot of times, sometimes I think like the Black community, we're prideful. We don't want to often ask for help of somebody else because especially parents, they want to be able to know that they're able to afford their child's education for themselves. So they don't want to look at outside resources who are able to aid that in that way.
Okay, so Lavinia, to you and on that discussion, because you had raised some parts about there could be some counter to the positive. So how are you seeing that in the sense of utilizing it?
Yeah, this is such a good segue. Before I hop into the answer to that, I do want to correct something I said earlier. I spent a lot of time at the Black Law Students Association of Canada this weekend with their kickoff mooting competition for Black History Month. I am the vice president of the Black Female Lawyers Network. So I just wanted to correct the record for anyone who's keen and knows those two organizations. But to answer the question, I think to take out money out of your home is always going to be a very risky thing to do. Like Tanisha mentioned, scholarships are going to be fantastic. Bursaries are going to be fantastic. There are also things that students can do that's going to, reduce the amount of money that they have to pay for themselves. So, for example, leading into my own experience, I was a residence fellow, and a residence fellow is a residence advisor where you are the person who leads the floor. You're responsible for 52 students, 100 students, however many students are on this dorm floor. The reason I raise that is because in exchange for being a residence advisor, you get free accommodation and free food. So, I mean, while you're doing your studies, and that really reduces significantly the cost of going to school. So, while our families, our Black families want to take care of their children, and, that's understandable. We want to set our kids up for a very successful financial future. Part of it is also giving them the responsibility to take care of themselves, and to really start to resolve their own issues. So, this isn't to say, just leave them out there to air dry and whatever happens to you. No, it's to say, help to the extent that you can. If you're now leaning into your retirement plan, you're leaning into, diluting the equity in the home and refinancing and perhaps getting terms that are not as agreeable as beneficial as they were in the past, those things are not going to be very good. It's going to catch up at some point to parents. And then once it catches up to parents, sometimes there's a kind of like a clawback or an expectation that the children are now going to help their families in the future when they now have issues with their own retirement plans. And that's something we see a lot in racialized homes, not just the Black Canadian community, but we see a lot with racialized families that there's this expectation that, very well to do children, once they grow up, there's an expectation that they take care of the older generation, which causes a sandwich of expectations financially, where, now you have this individual who's taking care of their elder, but they're also taking care of the children. So to avoid all of that, I think the earlier we teach our children financial literacy and the earlier we coach them along to find access to bursaries, scholarships, things like the Residence Fellow program that I mentioned, I think it can really support people to start to become independent themselves and successful at that.
Hmm. Okay, so then Josephine, what's your take on it? We had our two younger individuals speak in the sense of yes, young people need to find ways to be able to best pay for their educational futures endeavors, be able to seek either bursaries, scholarships, other means. But with that stated, we know that there's only so many scholarships, so many bursaries. That even if the most intelligent of all of our students all apply, there's going to be a vast amount that will not receive that. So to my original question on the sense about the parents and taking out the mortgage of a home, still having the home, but taking out some of the equity, how do you see that?
We have to understand that the stats show it as 35 to 30 to 35%. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking up the stat again.
Okay.
Homes owned by Black families are 30,000 to 50,000% or $30,000 to $50,000 undervalued. So when you look at it, especially because my background is construction, right off the bat, if you live in a Black dominated community, your house is not going to be worth as much as someone else that lives in a white dominated community. So we don't have that play. When it comes to taking out money and equity from the home, it's okay, but there has to be a clear pathway of how we're going to utilize the money. If it's for education, that's fine. But again, because say as a parent and growing up, I didn't own a home, I want to give my children the best possible future. So saying yes to them in terms of taking equity from the home feels like a necessity, but it's okay for them to struggle. It's okay for them to learn the real world. It's okay for them to appreciate the fact that you worked very hard to get this home. So taking out that equity to pay for your education and or even a trip per se, you just need to live within the means. And it's so important to understand that. It's so important to let our children understand that yes, you get a home that has already been paid for, but you need to understand the value and the effort that came into acquiring that property and understanding that you can leverage that property to, again, create generational wealth now for your generation. So that is a strong understanding of the property industry and the housing industry as a whole, but understanding that it's okay to tell our kids no. It's okay to say, no, you need to figure this out. And when push comes to shove, we have the ability to take out equity from the home, but we need a clear path on how we're going to utilize the money.
Circling back. So Latoya, what's your
Yeah.
perspective?
So I have a lot of different perspectives here. I'm a mother with young kids under 5. I own a home. If God forbid anything would happen to me, do I want to leave my home for my kids at the state that it is in? No, I'm leaving debt. So that's one thing I would be clear about for everyone. Probably I would stipulate selling the home and then they get a percentage of the home, and what they can do with that money can be in a trust or something. That is a better pathway that I would decide for my home. I would not leave that. Then when it comes to students, I work heavily in student life as part of a scholarship foundation, as a teacher. Why is it so difficult for our Black students to apply for scholarships? Why is it that such a hard thing? We are basically combing tooth and nail just to get them to apply. I would send scholarship opportunities over and over again. Why aren't they applying? Why are even Black students not applying? Black boys. So there's a lot of things happening in our community. What is the problem to get the scholarships in front of their faces or the opportunities in front of their faces once they possibly see the paperwork? There's this sort of apprehension to that as well. So I think at family level, it's important to educate your children on what is important when it comes to scholarships, what is important when it comes to RESPs, setting that up for your children as well. So that way you possibly don't have to go into taking equity off of your home. What is residual income? My son is 5 years old. He's an author. His name is on several parts of our business, gaining money. So what is that? What is the foundation that I'm building and teaching my children right now? He goes to the banks. He's understanding money. He's in the business world because we see the benefit of knowledge now for him to set him up for the future. So there's many aspects here. Getting our students, our Black students, to be, active when it comes to getting out there, getting the scholarship. There's so much scholarships out there just waiting for them based on merit, based on grades.
So
Take the chance.
springboarding on that then, Latoya. So when we talk about financial literacy, we're both educators on the screen, but we're going to talk from within the family perspective, right? Because if we leave everything to our educational system, we already know where the deficit factor is with regards to Black children, and the value of what we're getting for what our money is, right? But from the family perspective, you made a good point as into, okay, you are having those conversations with your children to understand the investments, to understand what true value of money is, where we are seeing that it's for a matter, it's not that our families don't understand money, right? It's coming down to how do we look at investing that money? Because we've had previous panels, the discussion is we're one of the largest consumer groups. So it's not as if we do not have money. We may not be making the higher echelons of funds per se when we talk about what's there, but we are consuming a great deal. And if we're consuming, we are putting out the money. So it then becomes a conversation as to we're talking about building this generational wealth is the starting point. So should we be saying to students, okay, I've had this conversation once and I have it back with some teachers, okay, maybe I shouldn't put it on an open forum like this, but when we're thinking of investments, how do we use other monies that we can gain to use to, I'll just say it anyway. So we then at one point at university started to realize OSAP was giving us a certain amount of money. We at the beginning parts were spending it foolishly, but then we decided to get a group together who then said, hold on, if we take X amount of the funds after we pay our tuition and we paid for our books, which are, etc., we had a large chunk of money still that was sitting there that previous years people went on vacation or whatever the case was, started to dump it into the bank. That at the end of the 4 years, people had money to give back to the government, which was their money to then use and then be able to build credit, et cetera, et cetera. But that was happening. But present day now, how do we teach our young people to say, here's how we invest and what is good to invest? Is it an RESP? Is it a GIC? Is it a just a bank account? And do they understand compounded interest? Look how many of our people don't have a compounded interest bank account, right? So how and what would you say would be some of the new or key things we should be looking at even their own little business, to your point. Your young son, Latoya, is an author, but we have other people who create landscaping companies. They could create babysitting companies. They could be IT specialists. They could be graphic people, right? We have a multitude of individuals, they do different things. So what should we be saying? Because it's not as if we're so devoid of knowledge of money. We know money because we're wearing the best Air Jordans or the fancy cars or the best trips or whatever social media is putting out there. So how should we be funneling this knowledge for the generational wealth? And since we went to youth, let me just say, so Lavinia and Tanisha, I'll go to you guys first and then come to our more seasoned individuals. So Lavinia, will go to you first.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to understand how money can compound and compound interest, and the fact that when we're spending our money, we're really stealing from the future. So, that brand new 10th pair of Jordans, 20th pair of Jordans, that could have been put on the S&P 500 on the stock market, right? Just little things like that, while it might feel like a small reward or a gift to ourselves in the moment, it really could have done so much more had it have been invested properly. And I think, just speaking to my own experience here growing up, that there was a lot of misinformation and no information really as it related to the stock market and what investing could look like. There was a lot of fear mongering. So, if you invest your money, you're going to lose all of it. And, you're nothing good is going to come from this thing because you don't know, we can't trust those banks or we can't trust those external institutions. And things have changed, right? We have the proliferation of the internet. We now have the proliferation of AI. I think those various different resources, which are free and accessible to most people, specifically focusing on our where we are right now, the geographic location of Canada, most people have access to the internet. Either within their homes or in a library, wherever, right? Taking advantage of that free information is really important. There are reputable sources from the government itself that teach Canadians how to be better with their money, with personal finance. There are news outlets. CNBC.make it is a really good one that I've seen often. YouTube, like places where people already are. Social media, people are already there. Being careful who you're listening to, of course, because you want good, reputable advice. But that being said, I do think that we need to do a better job of not just making the money and then seeing money as a way to get things and consume. And I speak about this generally, but seeing money as a tool to make even more money. So I love the fact that Latoya, you mentioned your son is an author. Business ownership, that is huge. Another thing that growing up I learned a lot of was, hey, you want to go to school, get a good job, and then work for a really good, find a good job and work there and stay there. And the truth of the matter is wealth generation, intergenerational wealth lies in business creation. So being able to hand down the house, yes, that's paid for, preferably being able to hand down a business. So when you have your children, you don't have to worry about them looking good for someone else to hire. Maybe you and your own business can hire them and they can take it over. And that is the succession planning for your business and then also the future planning for your child. So I'll just leave it there and give Tanisha a chance to, jump into that piece. But there are so many avenues and so many different things you can do with that Jordan's money that could buy you 100 Jordans if you
Yeah.
leave the money alone for long enough in the right
Yeah.
spot.
And it doesn't have to be brick and mortar when we talk about business, right? So Tanisha, you?
Okay, I would definitely say I am a victim of the Jordan money. I remember, so I'm 23 right now. For context, at 17, when I got my first job, the first one I bought was Jordans. Like I was a sneakerhead. And then I think about that now being 23, almost being 6 years ago, that money could have gone to the S&P 500. And I think a lot of times youth have such the biggest advantage right now. There are so many different platforms where you're able to look at. We're able to look at financial literacy. Like one of the great books I recommend, it was just released last year or in 2024. It's called 17 to Millionaire. It really, because I think a lot of times, like before, we didn't really talk about Canadian financial literacy. We always hear about American financial literacy. So I feel like that is a really good book that breaks down things like FHSA, THSA, RESP, because I feel like a lot of times, especially in education systems, we don't learn about these things. We learn about math, we learn about the Pythagorean theorem, we learn about all these things which are important, but we don't talk about them now. But we don't learn about, okay, credit score. Why does that matter? Because I feel like a lot of youth, especially when they go to university, especially if they go away, they get that first credit card and that credit card is maxed out. They don't know that you only have to spend 30% of everything. So I feel like there's so many different resources that we can look up. And I feel like also sometimes like Black people themselves are like the gatekeepers of knowledge, and not in that way where it's like, okay, they know the knowledge, but they're not learning. Like I feel like a lot of times we're scared to ask for help because we don't want people to see us struggling, but it's okay to ask for help. There's so many different tools and resources that want to help us now. We can't be scared to ask for help because that's affecting our kids, and that's builds not intergenerational trauma, but intergenerational brokenness potentially, because let's say your parents have no money, then you have no money, then your kids have no money. And instead of building that wealth, we're building what's the word? We're building debt over time and time again. So I feel like it's also a mindset thing as well. Like we need to recognize that financial literacy isn't a skill, it's a necessity. It's something that you need, especially in living in one of the most expensive economies in the world.
And Latoya, back to you per se.
Honestly, Tanisha touched on such incredible points. I was just going to talk about teaching grade 10, and the text just happened to have credit score in it. And so when I dived into the text and the questions started rolling, I was like, you guys don't know about this? Credit score, credit card, da, da. And when I was finished with the class, they said if they graduated that day, it will be enough for them because that's the first time they felt that they learned content that they could actually use in their real lives. And so this type of thinking is what I started to think about when I was in university building the whole student initiative curriculum. I didn't know what it was then, but now that we are giving students, Black high school students, scholarships, I thought it was incredibly important not to just hand them money, but to teach them the value of that money. So we have financial literacy, we have cultural awareness, we have mental awareness, we have workshops on every aspect that would involve a healthy, whole student. Because let's face it, everything we learn is based on the community that we're around, but most importantly, our family. So if our family is not talking money and is not talking generational and vision in that sight, seeing ahead of what could happen for your life or your finances and prepare you for that, you're not learning that. And if our schools, as you just said, Yvette, we cannot depend on our schools and the curriculum to be targeting those things because remember, everyone is not starting off from the same starting point, especially our children. We, as our community, have to take charge and ensure that they are being given the tools, the knowledge, just the conversation will help their futures.
And Josephine, when you talk about the intentionality, right, so what should Black families be doing, springing from this part of the conversation with what we're talking about?
So, for many Black families, including myself, we weren't taught about wealth in general. Speaking personally, I came from Sudan, and being in Canada, it was about survival. So, money conversation often centered about paying bills, making sure the house was there, making sure we had food on the table. So, getting to have a conversation about legacy protection and long-term planning was not really there, especially as a first generation Canadian. The gap wasn't accidental on top of it. It's a historic understanding that Black families are starting way far behind the line. So how can we translate that? Me now, like I said, as a first generation Canadian, I need to be able to have these conversations with my kids. I need to have open conversation with my kids. They know what a bank is. They know what the bank is used for. What is good debt? What is bad debt? These are conversations that I'm having with my 11, 12, 12-year-old because it's so important for them to understand the narrative can change for us as a Black community as a whole. Understanding and having these open communications and open conversation with our community is going to set us up and it's going to set our children up for life. So don't delay it. Don't shun it. If you don't have the information, we have Google. Search it. And again, reach out to other families that have maybe gone through this. There's nothing to be embarrassed about not knowing money. It is a conversation that can be easily had if we are comfortable with having the conversation.
And there's so many like organizations now, even the TikTokers, the Black TikTokers are running so many free webinars and functions, how to even start new online businesses, how to do investments, how to do LLCs, how to, right? And all the other applicable terms for here in Canada. But there's a wealth of knowledge that is out there for people to start tapping in, and even for the older generation to tap in and get our knowledge and comprehension so that we can assist. And again, it's about the conversations, right? If the conversation is even started, then children are looking elsewhere to try to see where they can find information, which may be correct, incorrect. And we have a lot of our young people, we're talking about investments that are going towards Bitcoin and that, but you can't see where Bitcoin exists and within that world. So when I think about investments, like, yes, stocks were a major thing. Like when I finally started to get in to buy the banks, right? Banks are stable. That interest, that money that you're making on banks is a nice little growth that sits where those are stocks that you can put down for the 20, 30 years, not worry about and have a nice return, right? And then you think about the tech stocks and some of the oil, how oil is growing now. So it's about the conversation with your kids that, yeah, that $100 can buy a stock. Right? You try to keep going each couple months, buy more stocks within something, and by time when you turn around, you're looking to see that you have a nice portfolio where you're seeing funds that are stable, right? It doesn't have to be the risk penny stocks that you got to watch every day and be ready to sell. We're talking about getting the real stocks that turn over, and you will see that potential growth within it. Kind of swinging a bit, and like everybody has put their caveat out and made sure they've had their statements that we're not, the investors, and we're not within the will and stuff like that. But how important is it that we look at for our parents and for any young parent to be looking at a will to make sure that we have a will set up? Well, before we even get to the will, put the will to the end for a second. Insurance. Are we looking at whole life? We're just looking at basic life insurance. What type of insurance should we be looking at to also be a protection for our children and that they can also use when we're talking about building the generational wealth? So I'll go to you, Latoya.
Yeah. So I have not to get too detailed into my
Watch your
into
whole business so we can copy and
but of course, like I think once we had our little one during COVID, it was an immediate action to have him on our insurance. I have all types of insurance, but it's really important. Actually, I started talking to our lawyer a couple of days ago about to make sure that now that we have more kids, where does everybody align in protection, in how they can use it in the future for education, expanding our knowledge on what can be done with life insurance. And actually, from that desire, we actually will be switching companies because we gained knowledge on how to use that money, not to just have it sitting there per se, just keep paying, but we've gained knowledge on some of the things that you can actually do with that. And we want to prepare, for example, probably paying off school or probably getting a down payment for our kids' house in the future. We want to make sure that the avenues and the pathways to that is easier for them. So I would say, just like me, once I gain more knowledge, we look at the resources we have in the portfolio that we have, and if the business matches what we plan to do with the money. Because a lot of times insurance could feel like it's just money going in, going in, going in, and you're not seeing anything until you need it, right? So I think it's really important to have life insurance. It could really, and the younger the better, actually. So if you haven't done it, definitely try to do it. It could feel as if you're just putting money into an empty vat somewhere that you never see, but it comes into handy once you know what to do with it. And that's where I would say get that knowledge, because 6, 7 years ago, I didn't have the knowledge, although I had life insurance, I didn't know what I could do with it. But I wasn't set up to use it in that way. That I could possibly use for a business. I use that, to leverage the money for certain things.
Josephine, your insights on that?
So insurance, there's so many different facets of insurance that you can get, whether it's business insurance, life insurance, even home insurance. We need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and our asset. When it comes to the different terms or different kinds of insurance, you have life insurance, as we just spoke about, and then you have term insurance. Those are ways that you can utilize your money to keep the kids' education fund, to buy stuff later on in life that is an emergency. Those are all ways to access term life insurance as a foundation, as well as permanent life insurance. So there's different kinds of insurance that you can use to leverage all that money that you've been saving or putting towards your payments and utilize it for whether it's tax breaks or estate planning or what's it called, transfer of estates. Like there's so many facets to it. You just need to understand that again, it's just the conversation. What is everyone's life is unique. So how we approach insurance in a whole depends on each and everyone's situation. So again, that's where you would want to talk to a professional, whether it's a lawyer or an insurance specialist. And you can really set up yourself and your family to be able to carry on your legacy and again, maintain that wealth that we are trying to access for our future generation.
Lavinia?
I think that there has been a really great comprehensive overview of insurance and how it would benefit the family and individuals who are looking to protect their futures. I would double down on that message from Latoya mentioning that the earlier you start, the better, or perhaps it was Josephine. I think you both spoke to that, but I think it's really important because things like your health, right? Your health is going to be at its best when you are the youngest you possibly are. And so, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the older you get is the more expensive it becomes to get life insurance. They're looking at things that you might have done in your life 5, 10 years ago, things that you're doing in your life now to determine whether or not they're going to charge you a high premium or a low premium. I was really shocked in my own experience to realize that that fun parasailing moment that I had in Turks and Caicos 3 years ago, I had to disclose it, and that meant that apparently that's a high risk sport or extreme sport for insurance companies. So, I mean, I say that to really I guess, make concrete the fact that the earlier you do it, the better, because, you don't have as much. First of all, you're younger, so naturally it's going to be cheaper. But secondly, there's not that much opportunity to start, engaging in certain things that might raise premiums. So, the older we get, chronic illnesses start to show up. There might even be insurance policies that won't even take you if you have certain illnesses. And that tends to crop up with age as well. So for those who are outside of their 20s, early 30s, it doesn't mean that all is lost. It just means that, if you haven't done it yet, you should probably get on it.
And Tanisha, what about you with the sense of insurance and what should be done?
Okay, I feel like when it comes to that, it's very important. Like I think a lot of like Black families, they need to stop thinking of like life insurance as like a bad thing. Like really, we need to reframe these as these are acts of care and protection. Because let's say something, God forbid, something happens, your child is already dealing with so much. You're gone. They need to have that structure and have that discipline of something with that they're able to come back on. I feel like especially in the Caribbean household, it's like, why are you talking about death so much? Like you're trying to promote it. But I think life insurance, I think insurance of all kind is needed. Like it's not like, for example, I'm 23. I like last year, if you asked me at 22, why would I need life insurance? I'm in my prime right now. But I think especially as you're getting older, especially like studying law, that's something you need because like, for example, like I said, like when people die, they're going through one of the hardest moments in their life. But do you really want to make it harder? Do you really want to be, for example, like you're gone and they're crying on the phone, having to call this person, that person, because you couldn't get a handle of it when you had the time?
Which is so very true. Most people are seeing it right at the time of death, right? Where individuals are realizing that when they thought their parents may have had life insurance or that they had a pension and that the pension and the company had life insurance that way, only to find out that no, or what is there is a very minuscule amount that is not covering the cost of that. So even for people, right now planning for their funeral, we got to let people, and everybody's like, Jamaica, why stop calling them a debt? Right? We got no type of a deal where it's like, yeah, no, you gotta plan because it's costing people a lot of money. Funerals are not cheap. And especially if we come from Caribbean and African nations, we know that our funerals are a real celebration of life, right? Like people are coming to have food and music and spend time. Some overdo it. but it is part of what we have. So it's very important that you take out life insurance. And as we can see from other ethnicities, life insurance is actually utilized to pay mortgages, to pay for educational endeavors and for business startups, etc. So we really and truly have to get a good handle on how to utilize our money with insurance and buying the right insurance. To Josephine's point, is it whole life? Is it term? Is it this, right? Like we have to make sure we have the right amount. And a lot of people always think that I only have to have one insurance. You got multiple, depending on what it is and for what purpose that you're dealing with. Now to just transition a bit in the sense of then the wills, right? To the point, a lot of people like to think if you're talking about will, then you are calling down my death and you're thinking, but you have to think across the board, and especially if you have a lot of children. And especially for the families, even if you don't have a lot of children like me, I have one child only, you still have to think how are you setting that up that on the time of your death, your child gets to deal with if you had a debt load, if you had other investments, if you had people you may have even promised things to, because at the time of death, everyone shows up. Oh, they said I was going to get this. This person said I was going to get that. I gave a loan to your family member and I want to collect that loan, right? And so everyone's overwhelmed. So the issue is, so how are we seeing wills? The value of the will in being able to help set up children or those who are left over to say, here's what it is, and this is how you're going to utilize it. Lavinia, I'll go to you, and then I'll jump to Josephine, and back to Tanisha, and then Latoya last.
Yeah, the will is going to be very important because all your life you're amassing wealth, right? You've got possessions. It could be as big as your house. It could be as small as a very an air not small for like an heirloom, but as small as an outfit or something that you have a very specific person in mind who you want these things to go to. And so putting your wishes, your final wishes into a will is going to help your family grieve in a way where they don't have to worry about the financial fallout from your death. So, they don't need to worry about what's going to happen with your funeral because you've already made your funeral arrangements. As Yvette mentioned, in terms of, in the Black community, there tends to be, it's a celebration of life. And so, what is your celebration of life going to look at? We need to dispel some of the myths and the stereotypes that exist within our community that if you start talking about these things and thinking about these things, you're going to call it down on yourself, faster than it might naturally have come otherwise. And that definitely is a myth. There's two things that we know for sure in life that if you're born, then you're going to die, right? And we need to have an understanding of what will happen then. Another big thing that's very important, especially as there are advances in medical technologies, is the fact that most people are more likely to acquire a disability as opposed to dying young. So people are living longer, but they are having disabilities and needing certain decisions made to support them in those disabilities. So in addition to the will, so knowing what's going to happen with your possessions, and also knowing what's going to happen with your liabilities and what you intend for your assets and your liabilities to look like, but having a power of attorney. So I'm not going to get too into depth with that because I am an employment lawyer, not a wills and estates lawyer, but a power of attorney is really going to help you manage your financial, legal, and personal care decisions. So you can have a power of attorney, somebody who can help you if you lose mental clarity to deal with your finances due to medical condition. Maybe there's legal matters that remain outstanding due to that medical condition. And then there are personal care powers of attorney that can help make medical decisions in your time of need when you don't necessarily have that mental capacity to do so for yourself. So these considerations are really important. It's very important to have a lawyer who can support you. There is actually a fantastic lawyer. She's another Black woman. Her name is Shayna Beeksma. She does fantastic work as it relates to wills and estates. And, I share her name because she is in the community. And I think it's important for us to have that cultural understanding of what wealth looks like in the Black community and have that cultural understanding of how people deal with matters this sensitive. So yeah, I think that that's a safe place to turn like actual more deep-seated questions about wills and estates to in terms of the legal piece to it anyways.
And so Josephine, as someone just mentioned, yeah, like to understand even a POA ceases at the time of death, right? So we got to make sure that we have the right stipulations in place for people to have an understanding. So what is your take with regards to the implementation of wills and what's required and how we should go about it?
In all honesty, it could just literally be a piece of paper that is notarized. We think that it needs to be completely structured to start off with, but when I had my daughter, it was literally a piece of paper. I let them know that if I pass away, the my mom will be the one responsible of taking care of my daughter. If I am in a catastrophic accident, my mother will be the one to take the responsibility of making my wishes happen. So something like that, like I said, when I first started off, I had my daughter very young. It was literally a piece of paper outlining what I needed to and what my I wanted for my daughter if I did pass away. For generations, we think about it as survival. In general, when you look at the will, more Black families have created such an amass of wealth, but we are not leaving the right information for our families. We need to leave a clear pathway of what we want to do with what wealth we have generated. And it's like I said, it can be as simple as writing it down on a piece of paper, taking it to a notary, and then it can be as in depth of where the money is going to go, what trust, what children, what percentage, and such and such. It's just so important to understand, like we've all been saying, is that death comes with so much mental strain. We do not want to put our family into even more mental strain without a direction of what we wanted to do with our finances and our assets in general. So when you think about it, it is a tool that families are often left to navigate in grief alongside legal delays. So why don't we just avoid all that and have something there for them to work off of?
Mhm. Good. And then just to try to switch and get touch on so many things that we have here, and then it's like so like Tanisha, when we look at so we talked about the wills and the aspects of stocks and investments. What are some other points that we're not looking at? So we talked about Lavinia had stated about heirlooms, the aspects of you said you were a sneakerhead. So even the fact that Jordans, if you have a bench that is well kept and pristine and cataloged appropriately, the fact that there is monies to be made there, again, the aspect of artwork being appraised. So how should other families be looking at within their items of possessions that they have? What things should be looked at as potential for revenue generating?
Okay, that is such a great question. I think the start of that is recognizing there's money in everything and there's money everywhere. I know you're thinking, why is there money in everything? Why is it everywhere? Especially the Black community, poverty is one of the things that people correlate with that. I think like a lot of times, like we buy these items, like for example, an iPhone. An iPhone has like so much worthy and value to it. It may not be worth the same thing in 5 to 10 years or 20 years, but it's all worth something. Or even like bags, like especially Black women, we love our bags. Like for example, Coach. I have a collection of Coach bags, which I'm sure as the time goes on, they'll be worth some money. And I think a lot of things, another thing, like for when it comes to wills, I think something we also have to think about is we spend so much time planning weddings. And weddings, yes, they're a beautiful celebration, but why do we never take the time to plan what happens when we die? Because yes, while weddings are a beautiful celebration of two people coming together, you would want like the people who are in your life to be prepared. So I think when it comes to like things like we need to think of like value items, like also taking care of items, like not just like for example, a stock market. The stock market, things are able to grow once you invest and they compound. We need to think of our items like that. Like for example, that could go from sneakers, that could go from bags, that could go from designer clothing. Taking care of that and recognizing that those like they kind of add wealth as similar to the stock market does.
And we also forget, you made a good point that when someone new is coming into your family, so again, I would say, yeah, I have an only child. She's going to get married someday, hopefully, right? Whoever that gentleman is, the question then becomes, is he going to try to snatch what we already have if I don't have a proper will laid out that it's solely hers or blah, 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 right? So all those different pieces that we really have to protect and make sure that we find that growth. Latoya? So Josephine, until she comes back, did you have another point? Okay. Oh, Latoya, you're ready.
Yes, so for me, I have a lot of intellectual property in my books and ideas and the companies, the trademarks that I have, the copyright. So sometimes for us, we have to think about the things that are not so tangible, but are, stored away. So even those, protect your business idea. I know there's a person in our community, he has bottled this incredible pepper sauce. And he has the recipe trademarks and all of that. That is something that you can put in a will. That is something that you can leave as a legacy, generational wealth built for your children. I know a lot of us are from the Caribbean and we have land all over the Caribbean, but many of this land is gone to the government because there's no will in place. There's no legal document that says when I pass, this land goes to Latoya Balfon. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned from wills is that ensure everything is properly laid out. Who does it go to? Who it belongs to? Because if you don't handle your business, the government will.
100%, 100%. And so, ladies, when we look here and then going back to then the families, we talked about the aspects of wills and making sure about investments and that, but the investments within families. How are we working, or what is the message between, siblings to say, how do we work to either sustain or build upon this potential generational wealth, right? Because a lot of times everyone's in their own little bubbles, doing their own things, but not realizing nor coming together to say, hey, we can do this. And this is what is required that we can help where other ethnicities are doing that. They are coming together to try to pool resources to make sure that a mortgage can be given to one and then build upon that. Either coming together and trying to make sure to support endeavors of a business that's being done. So how do we in our community, and I'm speaking within the family nexus, what do we need to do to look more about working together and how to springboard that into some form of a growth? And whomever would like to take it first.
I
I'm
don't
seeing
mind going for.
Josephine with a look like, hmm.
I don't mind going first because I think trust, one mind. It's great to talk about replicating what we see other communities do. Like, we talk about this idea that from the Filipino community, they come, or the Asian community, everybody comes, everybody stays in one apartment, we all pull together, there's trust. And we have to be honest with our people, with our kind. We've had some broken trust, even within each other, within our communities. It's hard to build trust. We've been often pit against each other. Unity is not always our natural go-to. And so that one thing, even as siblings, is how do we trust each other that we're on the same page and that we have one mind and that right now we're investing in my idea and that you trust me that when I'm done, that we will invest in the next person. So I think building the trust in our community, even in our families, is incredibly important. And how do we do that? Is a conversation to start happening in our community.
For the sharing of trust information. Josephine?
In general, it's just about like it's touching back on we all need to work together. It is not an individualized goal, it's a family goal. So when we work together as a family unit, we share the common goal of creating wealth and building generational wealth. So we speak about it so often, we hear about it so often, but it's not implicated and it's not actually followed through with it. So what we need to do is just follow through. We hear other communities making leaps and bounds in creating generational wealth for themselves and their family, but like we've already mentioned, it's trust and it's having that open line of communication within the family. We can create so much if we just work together. It's not about fighting for who's going to get there first or second or anything like that. It's, again, focusing on the common goal and utilizing our ability to just work together to get to where we need to go. And that's something that I have to reiterate constantly with myself and the family because Sometimes it is going to be difficult. Sometimes it is a lot of sacrifice, but the end goal is going to be so amazing that all of this effort that you put, whether it's 2, 3, 5, or 10 years, is going to pay off. And you will see the dividends pay out for years and years to come. So be patient. Again, create trust within the community, create trust within your family, and create a common goal because that common goal should be aligned with everyone's intention to achieve it.
Tanisha?
Okay. To go off Josephine's point, I wholeheartedly agree. I also think communication, like having that sense of communication, especially while everyone's alive, like having the open communication about what are our intentions, what are our expectations, what are our values. So basically, when we're making a decision with our siblings, we understand the why behind decisions, not simply just the outcomes. And now these conversations, they're uncomfortable, especially within families that money has always been like such a private and taboo issue. But ultimately, that builds the transparency over time. It builds trust and it reduces resentment versus like, oh, you get this amount of money versus you get that amount of money. And therefore, also like our parents and our elders need to model that openness because we need to also make sure that we have that good relationship with our siblings because we can't all be when everyone's alive, we're at each other's heads. And then when people pass away, we're expected to come together because likely that doesn't happen.
Lavinia?
Yeah, to build on what everyone is saying, I think it's important to have those open lines of communication, to approach those difficult conversations that have led to the breakdown of the relationship within the Black family or home. I also think it's really important as Black people for us to understand with an abundance of clarity, the circumstances of our existence as we are in 2026. So, what I mean by that is understanding that this collective distrust of each other, this collective, like me against you and you against me, and like just this lack of collaboration is very much intentional, right? The intention is to divide and conquer. The intention is to ensure that we don't collaborate so that we can continue to be oppressed. And that's not me saying that. That is history. That is what slavery looked like, as it was a physical shackle. And that is what it looks like, the remnants of it, the mental and the emotional fallout that we continue to see in 2026. So, in order to, I don't just like to talk about the issue, I like to propose solutions. The solution that I think is available to us as we build back the trust and start to get to where we used to be, as a community is contracts, legally speaking. So at the beginning of any relationship, the best time to have a conversation that it has an abundance of clarity is before things happen. So a contract talking about what it is that you're trying to do with your business or whatever this collaboration might be, the money, what the partnership, what is going to happen if it dissolves, right? What is everyone walking away with? So if for whatever reason we are no longer on the same page, what are we agreeing everyone walks away with? And I think the more you can kind of think from the outset what might happen in the future if this particular event comes to arise is going to lead more to that trust. The nice thing about contracts, they're airtight. Courts don't like to engage in breaking apart an agreement between two people. So a contract can be verbal, it can be written. Really and truly, there's a three-part test that makes every contract a solidifying legal document. And it's number one, there's some type of an offer. So, what are we doing together? What exactly is happening here? Number two, there's some type of what we call consideration. So what is the value? So if we're talking about building a business together, the offer is, hey, do you want to start this restaurant with me? The consideration is, hey, once we make this money, 50% is mine, 50% is yours. And then the third part of that legal test is agreement. So did we agree to this particular set of terms and conditions, based on the offer and the consideration that I just mentioned earlier? So I think the more we can put things into writing, as a culture, we are very, verbal based, oral based, but I think we need to move beyond that, into solidifying and formalizing some of our arrangements with each other so that when things are great, they're great. But if things fall apart, we know exactly what's going to happen at that moment in time.
And those are good points because in principle, yes, that definitely works and we use it normally outside of family, right? That those would be the definite aspects of how we operate with what we're doing. So within that then, so we talk about the larger context of society and what we're trying to do to build upon that. What would be from your own perspectives or from your interest, from your knowledge, you're interacting, what are some areas that we may not be looking at, where we, the Black community as a whole, then can think about, or some niche points for where generational wealth can be accessed, right? Like where are some areas that we have not thought to ponder for long? We have not thought to put any of our finances behind, or where we could, through your point, Lavinia, about contracts, be able to look about building something with an actual criterions with regards to what is required. So Tanisha, I'll start with you. Where do you think in some areas we have not been looking, we have not thought to invest, or we have not put enough time into those perspectives?
Okay, that is such a great question. Okay, I would say first thing, we need to recognize that generational wealth, it is not just money, it exists in knowledge, networks, and proximity to opportunity. There is opportunity everywhere now in 2026. It's different than 1,000 years ago where there wasn't many opportunities. There's opportunities when it comes to, we also need to learn to capitalize on our skills. If we have so many unique skills such as like website building, graphic design, content creation, there is money in every single thing that you can do. It's just a matter of actually putting that to motion, for example. Like for example, if you're a lawyer, being able to offer those services and skills and maybe even talking about being a lawyer. Like a lot of times people don't think the way how different things intersect. And I think that's also important for intersectionality. Think about how the different layers of your identity can also lead to social capital. And that also involves relationship building, making sure that we're building relationships with mentors, professional, community leaders, faith leaders. Those open doors to opportunities that we wouldn't think about. And a lot of times these are not just transactional relationships. These are relationships involved having a community. Another thing I would say is employer-based benefits. Like for example, there's pensions, there's employer match RSSPs or TFSAs. Using those when you're working in a job, like for example, you not using your vacation days and losing them year after year doesn't help you. So
Mhm.
thinking about those ways, like we always think about the transactional ways, but think about the simple ways that you can do. Like one thing somebody always said, if money's not for you, no, if LinkedIn isn't for you, money's not for you. There's a plethora of opportunities there on LinkedIn, for example. And a lot of young people, they don't like to use LinkedIn because they're like, okay, LinkedIn is kind of cringe. But the thing is, we're all on Instagram, and Instagram has moments of cringe. Instagram has moments. So like think of LinkedIn like a professional Instagram. And that's all I'll say on that issue.
I don't use mine properly. Lavinia, go ahead.
Okay, so as it relates to pieces that we could start thinking about, as we build back trust within the community and amongst each other, I think it's important for us to start thinking about what a credit union could even look like. So a lot of people, earlier Yvette, you spoke about redlining in the US and the fact that sometimes individuals are denied access to funding for their various initiatives. And if there was, and this is, of course, theoretically speaking here, if there was a credit union that the Black community could turn to, and we service for us by us, I think that could be a good stepping stone to a more wealthier future. So what that might look like, I'm not sure, but it would take a collective lifting of sorts to change the mindset of consumption to a mindset of investment. And it would require a collaborative effort from the community as a whole to really trust ourselves, to build something for ourselves. And of course, anyone else who wants to invest, they're welcome to do so. But similar to other credit unions that exist, the core component to that credit union, the core purpose would be to build from the Black community in service to the Black community and others who might want service as well. And that's nothing novel or transformative that I'm raising. It's something that many communities have. There is a Jewish credit union. There are tons of other credit unions. And so what that might look like for the Black community, I'm not sure. The other piece that we're missing that I think other cultures, other groups have access to is the fact that we have been divided. Black can be peoples from Africa. Black can be people from the Caribbean. Black can be people from It's Italy. There are Black people everywhere, and there are differences and nuances to us all. So, what does that even look like, right? Um, I have so many thoughts on this. I'll leave that there, but I think a big next part to this conversation is what does community building look like as it relates to banking and credit unions for the Black community?
And as you know, we do have the Black Credit Union that is in the works right now, with regards to trying to get things to a finalized phase and stage. But again, to the point, that trust is a big issue, and we are over scrutinized by the government with regards to what it is that we put forward. And then if you look even at the Black Fund, what that was supposed to do, it did not do the stringency, the loopholes, the jumping over hurdles that people had to do to just to get $10,000 was mind-boggling. And then to even think a business asking for 100,000, majority of our Black community people couldn't meet that threshold, right? So there are those pieces again that we have to look about the racism, the discrimination that is built within these so-called policies and funding that's supposed to elevate, but do not take into considerations where we are situated, right? So it creates even more of a roadblock of what's there. And then sadly, to the detriment of those who are leading those organizations, they get scapegoated as being the ones that are then whitewashed or part of the colonialist mindset because they're the faces that are put to the front trying to push forward these agendas, right? So it is that conversation that you're really true. And then we have to keep having more of it, even though some of the old heads like myself, we are now jaded and we're very tired because we have been the activists at the forefront for so long that it's like, Chuck, got the same thing again, right? The whole kiss teeth thing is happening because people are just vexed, but it's required because we also have to remember that there are a generation behind us, right? Because I'm old, so I know that there's still those younger than my daughter who still are not even aware of what has been done or the inception of what had been created and has been lost and needs to be brought back. So the discussion has to be continuous and we have to step outside of our frustration and be like, nope, we need to come back and really have the conversations. Josephine, to you.
To hit on the credit union, we are working towards it. At something that I have actually looked into just because I have been trying to get funding for my business at a whole. Construction is one of those industries that is so difficult to get funding. And then you put up the barrier of one being Black, one being a woman in the industry. I don't have that extensive repertoire of completed construction projects that they look at. So just trying to, again, work with our community to get to a place where why are we getting so stringently, I guess, penalized for something that we're capable of doing as a whole? How do we as a community work together to essentially get to the next level? We have multiple business ideas, or we have fantastic business ideas and great, what's it called, structure in these business ideas, but we're not seeing or reaping the rewards of all the financial grants and or funding that's out there because we're not aware of them. So how do we again start up the conversation to um sorry, my son, how do we start up this conversation where we can actually position ourselves to grow our businesses for our financial freedom and our legacy. So that's something that we have to keep in mind is that, again, we need to work as a community to really set ourselves up for success.
And Latoya, on to you.
I'll say it again for the 100th time, intellectual property. Black History Month is filled with did you know? Did you know this person created, this person developed, this person made, this person, it's filled. We create culture, music, art, stories, ideas, but we do not always own copyright trademark. It costs $64 to copyright your idea. $64. It costs about $500, and the lawyer in the house can correct me, but I've been through it a couple of times. About $500 to trademark your business name or your logo or something. I've seen too often now that Facebook, social media, heavily monetized. It's ideas that are free for the picking for anyone if you do not copyright or own the very things that you're posting and trying to monetize. So there's
Mm,
money to be made. There's ideas floating around, but they're not yours if you do not have ownership of them, even your own thoughts. So this is something that must be done. You monetize off of Facebook. Is it your idea? You see that the money is going to someone else. Create the music, license your music, publish your music, and gain the income from that. So that's one of the things I hope to leave. Whatever idea you have, whatever business idea you have, whatever business plan, whatever architectural design, whatever sauce your grandmother showed you how to make, you protect the idea and you
very
build your
good.
wealth.
Very good. True points, true points. And as we wrap up here, and Josephine, your son's too cute in the background there. Um, let's give your final thoughts here, ladies. So I'll give you like a minute to wrap up. What's your final thoughts with regards to generational wealth? How do we attain it? How do we get to it? What are some of the key things you think we are missing? We touched on a great deal here in this little short time that went fast. So leaving it up to you, Latoya, I'll come back to you to lead us off.
I believe that the vision, it takes vision. A lot of, just like Josephine said, a lot of us are still in survival mode, stemming from our parents. But if you can envision a world where your children have 10 steps ahead in the positive direction, you will take the time to set up and build the foundation for generational wealth for them.
Lavinia?
Credit unions and resilience. I stand corrected that there is something that is currently existent as it relates to a Black credit union, and I understand there was one before. But we absolutely need to collaborate that resilience even further, because the racism is always going to be there, the discrimination, the extra scrutiny on everything that we do as a community. And I've got some homework to do, and I hope others do as well as it relates to the Black Credit Union, as well as the other funding sources at the community level that were mentioned, that we hear about. So we do see these things, but there isn't a ton of attention to it. And a lot of that is very intentional as well. So I will leave that there.
Mhm. Josephine?
Ah, there's so much to say, but in our community, wealth isn't about survival or making money. It's about protecting it. We're in a place now that these conversations are being had. So let's keep having these conversations. We need to master the skill of structure, insurance, wills, credits, intentional planning. And it's not a sign of fear, it's a sign of privilege. We are where we are now because of these conversations that we've had previously. And we have so much more conversations to be had. We need to understand the tools that are given to us, the tools that are already in place. How do we use them for our benefit? How do we use them to structure our future for ourselves and our family? When we plan, we remove the burden for our children and preventing loss during crisis and turning hard work that you spent 9 to 5 for years and years and years. So, how do we create the real generational wealth and make sure that it's passed along to
Mhm.
our families and our children? And we need to protect it, and we deserve it. We
I hear
are,
you.
yeah, we deserve it. So let's continue having the conversation. Let's continue working towards it. And let's figure out a way that we can have more conversations.
Good,
So, yeah.
good. Tanisha?
Okay, I will make mine short and sweet. I think the beautiful thing about the Black community is everybody has a vision, but we need to be less of visionaries and more of executors because everybody has this grand scheme of vision of what they want to do, especially when it comes to wealth. But we actually need to execute it. We actually need to launch it. We actually need to protect it because it's great to touch so much money, but if you're doing nothing to protect it and actually execute with like also execute on the ideas that you have, don't just sit there and keep it in your head, show it to the world. There's money and opportunity in anything and everything if you have the right structure,
Yep.
strategy, and preparation towards it.
Fantastic. Ladies, time has caught us up, and we have a lot of people who seem to have some questions for you afterwards. As usual, you will be hanging around after we close out the session formally. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. There were some very good points made, some enlightening aspects, and for us to continue to look forward in the future as to what it is that we need to do for generational wealth and growing us in the Black community to be even better and stronger than where we situate today. So, again, thank you. And join us on future episodes of the 100 ABC Fireside Chats. You can find that on the website, so please stay tuned and stay locked in as to what we're doing with all these fabulous women that you see with all their insight, their knowledge, their professionalism. Have a great day.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 woman growing strong. 100 woman where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny.